Want every episode, not just the hits? Join the Unrefined front row or backstage because sponsors get it all. Grab your pass at join.unrefinedpodcast.com. Rock on and stay unrefined.
I don't know, maybe St. Nicholas found him in the hallway afterwards and punched him. But he did become a patron saint of children.
Greetings and welcome to the Unrefined Podcast. I am Brandon Spain, your host on this journey through the mysterious, the unexplained, and the supernatural, all viewed through the lens of biblical truth. Connect with us and gain access to exclusive content at unrefinedpodcast.com. Now, for this week's episode. All right, y'all. Brandon here, and I've got the crew with me today. In the studio is my co-navigator of all things fringe, Lindsy, and joining us as guest co-host is the always steady and insightful Jennifer. Today we're cracking open another episode of Unrefined, and this time we're diving straight into the real history behind one of the most misunderstood holidays out there, Christmas. We're cutting through the internet myths, meme theology, and all the pseudo-history your cousin loves to repost, and we were looking at what the early church actually believed about December 25th, the theology, the tradition, and the story behind it all. Guiding us through the chaos with that trademark blend of scholarship, edge, and humor is historian, anthropologist, and theologian, Dr. Judd Burton. Thank you, Dr. Judd, for being here with us today. We appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Well, around this time of the year, in December, everybody's feeds light up. I hope you do a bull feathers about this. But and I think some people really are sincere, and I think some people are just trolls and just like to, aggravate people. I think it tends to lean more towards the Hebrew roots tourist type group people, but I've seen it all through the truther community and stuff. So what we're going to talk about today, you guys, is the fact that Christmas is not, and I'll repeat, not a pagan holiday. So, Dr. Judd, where did all this mess come from? I mean,
you mean
it started here?
You mean the droning din of the bah humbugers, as I've come to call them?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
there's some Dickens in there. Yeah, that's great.
Well, that's an excellent question. I mean, because of the timing of Christmas, and we can certainly get into all the cultural milieu why we do that at that time of the year, but the season coincides with a number of old not harvest festivals, but solstice festivals that ancient polytheists observed. And so the sort of pharisaical approach to, Christians celebrating anything, believers celebrating anything at this time is seen as some sort of quite absurdly, I might point out, seen as some sort of affront to sacred time. But nothing could be further from the truth, as I hope we'll sort of meet out tonight in our discussion. But the roots of celebrating Christ's birth during the winter period, specifically in December, goes back quite a ways. I suspect that a lot of the malignment of Christianity comes from what I call a Da Vinci Code understanding of the emergence of the date. And most people just immediately, who fall into that category, immediately default to equating Constantine's worship of the Sol Invictus. It's this Mithraic cult that had been Latinized, and its celebration on the solstice as a conflation of Jesus Christ and the Mithraic Sol Invictus. And again, we can sort of slash that apart too if you want to. But what we're trying to do here is to illustrate that it's more than okay, it's more than permitted to to celebrate Christmas. It's an act of spiritual warfare. Because all of time belongs to the Creator. None of it should be ceded over, quote unquote, to the devil. If anything, we're commanded in missional style to take back sacred space and sacred time.
My big question is, who wouldn't want to celebrate Jesus' birth? I guess maybe I don't think in that frame or way. Why is it a bad thing to celebrate Jesus' birth?
Well, certainly the angels celebrated
Exactly.
it. Certainly the shepherds celebrated it. Once the Magi found out about it, they celebrated it. The Jesus' own cousin, who was still in the womb, celebrated it. So,
Yeah.
and even in a sort of, I guess maybe secondary or tertiary way, Jesus himself encouraged it. Just before he died, he encouraged people to, when they gather together, to celebrate. And what could be more celebratory than honoring the birth of the Messiah, the fulfillment of prophecy, the foundational hope that all of our faith is based upon. It's a pretty slippery slope to lambast Christmas and put it in the same cart as just basically a dressed up pagan festival with a Christian facade. That's really historically disingenuous.
Yeah. Well, is there any evidence in the early church of Christmas, like before the whole Constantine Sol Invictus, which we'll get to
Well,
later
yeah,
on?
absolutely. Hippolytus of Rome, a bishop of Rome, who lived in the late second, early third century AD, writes about this festival honoring the birth of Christ, and arguably his record of that celebration is simply of his day. That it was something that had been going on, and if it was a tradition that went all the way back to the very early church in the first century AD, that's compelling, particularly when you consider that Hippolytus was a student of Irenaeus, who in turn was part of the Johannine line of students that included the likes of Polycarp when John was in Ephesus. So my suspicion is that Hippolytus is simply writing about the honoring of this festival in his day, and that it was actually done quite a bit earlier. That's the thing that I'm always telling people about the church fathers, is that you find all these nuggets of insight that can sort of quell these ideas about conflating the birth of Christ with the Saturnalia or the Sol Invictus or Yuletide, half a dozen other pagan festivals.
Well, let me ask you this, logic wise, as you were talking about that, something kind of kicked into my brain, and all right, is not one of the feasts of
Mhm.
Israel. It was a celebratory national holiday that Jesus actually co-opted
Mhm.
when he said, "I am the light of the world."
Certainly.
And I'm even curious. I don't know. I probably will have somebody out there that'll correct me here, but I'm even curious if it was celebrated in December or if it was just arbitrarily selected that, hey, this is when we're going to celebrate this holiday. People get all stuck in that Jesus was born on September 11th, and I don't want to go
Mhm.
there because
Mhm.
I could agree with that.
Certainly, yeah. I
Yeah,
think that I have no problem with Jesus being born in September. That seems to be where the evidence points. But even if he was born in September, that still means that he was conceived in December.
exactly.
Um, and in the ancient world, this is just sort of an aside that I thought of. The importance of a person's conception date and birth date were equally important.
Mm,
Um, and
go there.
so,
Will you go there for us? I want to hear about that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
well, I mean, it's a larger Greco-Roman element. Like I'm thinking of Caesar Augustus. His horoscope was a very famous one. And this is one of the reasons that Herod the Great built the temple to Augustus at the Panaion at Panaeus, is because he was conceived under the sign of Capricorn and born in the fall, I think. So that's just an example of a larger sort of cultural bracket that in the world that Jesus was born into, conception dates and birth dates were equally important. And so, I mean, even if Jesus was born in September, as the case probably is. He was still conceived in December, and it's still, if you want to make it about sacred timing, it's still about sacred timing. I mean, it's
Still
arguably
holy.
the most sacred
Yeah.
of times.
Yeah. Conceived of the Holy Spirit. We say it in the creed. I mean, to me, it's super
Well, and
important.
there are
And
arguments to be made for both September and for a winter bird too. You know, the account of the shepherds out in the field watching their flocks. Well, they're out there even in winter, and according to the agrarian precepts of the day, the sheep had to be sheared by February. So, they fattened them up, you know, and kept them out to pasture as long as they possibly could. And yeah, it was cold and nippy, even in Israel at the time during those months. As I wrote about in 12 Days of Christmas Bible Studies, which I'm actually going to re-release
cool.
this year, and I'll probably be doing another one of those next year. So there's some interesting cases to be made for both dates. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
No,
But
you're right.
they're historical and cultural reasons why we've chosen to celebrate his birth in December, and it has nothing to do with pagan deities.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, let's if it's all right with you, let's dive into the pagan parallels that people use for these, that they correlate. I want to use that. I mean, I could spend a whole hour talking with you, Dr. Judd, just about the logic or illogic of how they come about some of this stuff. We ain't even got to the two Babylons yet.
No. Yeah, that's a whole can of worms unto itself.
Can of worms. Yeah, we'll get there. But give us some background about the main two pagan parallels that people will, well, and the Druid one, I guess, as well.
Well, since we're dealing with the Greco-Roman world, the two that most people default to are the cult of the Sol Invictus and the Saturnalia festival. The Saturnalia festival predates the Sol Invictus cult by quite a bit, because it's one of the foundational festivals of Rome, paying homage to the god Saturn, whose rough equivalent in Greek mythology would be Kronos. But as I'm quick to point out, they're contrary to popular belief. The Roman gods are not exact analogs for the Greek gods. But suffice to say that, you know, along with gods like Jupiter and Mars and Quirinius, and who was the deified Romulus, these kinds of festivals to the heavy hitters in Roman mythology were foundational, and they date back to arguably before the Republic, you know, to when Rome was a monarchy. So the Saturnalia festival was actually a series of days that went from December the 17th through the 23rd. There were a lot of the things that we associate with Christmas, like that are similar, like gift giving and hanging of evergreen branches and lights and things of that nature. But it was one of the things that really served to set it apart was that it was kind of a bawdy festival. It was almost like a carnival, Mardi Gras sort of event that mirrored little of the Christian principles, if any. It just so happened to take place during December. The other is the Sol Invictus cult, which technically was Mithraism that was Romanized, and Mithra was an Eastern deity, solar deity, and actually by the time of the empire, the Roman Empire, the Sol Invictus cult was probably the most widely practiced of these mystery religions in Rome, largely because it was adopted in large part by the Roman army. So you find, you know, Mithraea, these places where Mithra was worshipped, in places like, you know, Asia Minor and Egypt, and as far away as Germany and Britain. Gaul, wherever the Roman, Spain, wherever the Roman army was, you're going to find these Mithraea during the imperial period. And the Sol Invictus celebration was generally the solstice, which falls on, you know, depending on the year, anywhere between the 20th and the 22nd of December. It's not even, that's why I'm saying the Da Vinci Code approach to the history of the period and the role that Constantine had in bringing Christianity to the fores, things like the Edict of Milan, to first give Christianity toleration and then its expansion. That somehow Constantine's conversion was not genuine, that he perpetuated and subsequently conflated um, the Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, and Jesus. In fact, some naysayers go so far as to say that Constantine created the Jesus image that Christians would later worship, which of course is nothing could be further from the truth. Usually, what they'll do is critique the anything Greek is equated as being pagan, including the language. It just so happens that Christoi, or excuse me, Christos, is the analog for the Hebrew Mashiach, which both mean anointed on the head or the eyes. It's in Greek, it's both a medical and a religious term, because medicine in the ancient Greek world was hard to separate from religion.
Yeah.
But most of the critics of using Jesus's Greek name, his transliterated name, Jesus, also stems from this sort of pharisaical approach to Christian observances of any kind outside of the biblical feast.
Yeah, and that's the point I was trying to make earlier. Is what I don't understand is some persuasions of this group they'll celebrate Hanukkah, and Hanukkah is not part of the Torah. I mean, it's intertestamental, and but yet it's like it's one of the festivals, and I'm like, okay, it doesn't make sense to me. Is what I'm trying to say.
It didn't make sense to Paul either. He wouldn't have written about it extensively in Romans and particularly Galatians. Not Christmas, but just going back so heavily under the law.
Yeah.
That it just sort of, you sort of nullify the whole need for redemption in the first place. It's kind of an aside, but I mean, even in the Old Testament, the law wasn't enough. Grace was still the greater measure of God's.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know that.
because nobody, even the people that the law was made for, they couldn't follow it completely.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a bit of a rabbit trail, but to circle
That's
back,
a good one. Yeah.
these are some of the criticisms that are pharisaically leveled against Christmas.
Yeah.
What about is there? I was reading about a festival called Brahmalia, I think it's called, that kind of butted into sort of the Saturnalia season. Is that part of it too? Would you say, or
It's well, part of the general. I was talking about it being a body time of the year, and Brumalia sort of fell in line with that, and again, keeping this PG and not going into all the details of this sort of carnival Mardi Gras atmosphere.
Yeah.
Is what you find during these observances.
Mm.
Somebody mentioned Yuletide.
Yeah. I mentioned that. Yeah.
Again, the when the church really started to kind of get its organizational bearings, it didn't take long for missionaries to be sent out into the disparate parts of pagan Europe.
Yeah.
And what these missionaries were told was if people are used to gathering in a grotto, where they had previously worshipped one of their gods, don't cut the trees down, build a church there, which was something that they had already been doing in the Mediterranean world. In places where they didn't tear temples down, they often converted them into churches.
Yeah.
They sanctified them and took them back, and that was just sort of the modus operandi for missions in the early church and in the late antique period for the church. And the Germanic peoples had an analog for this. The Slavic peoples did. The Celtic peoples and the British Isles did, and that was Yuletide, which marked this transition of the midway point, basically, of the dark half of the year, which was, of course, heavily populated by, commerce with the spirits and gods that they worshipped. not the least of which was Kern, who was kind of the god of the hunt and dark things and dark times. And
Was that the antler-headed guy? Sometimes
that
he's
is
depicted with antlers.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, the Kern, the horned one, who's depicted on artifacts in the Celtic world from Turkey to the British Isles. But that image of the Green Man sort of became the Father Christmas image, and that gets us into a whole other can of worms. Do we want to go down the Saint Nicholas route too?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
May as well. It's a big disappointment to me.
To go down the Saint Nicholas route or learn the truth about him.
Yeah, learn the truth about him.
Well, take heart, because he's still part of church tradition.
Yeah, he is.
And Nicholas, of course, was a bishop in Asia Minor or Myrna, and we actually have record of him being at the Council of Nicaea. There is a famous, although probably apocryphal, tale of his smacking the heretic at the very center of the Nicene Council, a guy named Arius, who caused all kinds of problems in questioning the nature of Jesus. And so there's a story that Nicholas took a swing or two at Arius, although that probably didn't happen because the bishops were meeting in council in one room and the priests were not allowed in it. So I don't know. Maybe St. Nicholas found him in the hallway afterwards and punched him. But he did become a patron saint of children, and became part of the Christmas tradition in Europe in particular. Although we have yet to find any record of him, driving a sleigh pulled by a flying reindeer. That must have been the disappointment that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I sympathize and empathize with you.
Well, it just, just kind of this whole finding out something that you thought was supernatural wasn't really real, I guess. It can.
I think that Nicholas's reputation is a good legacy for Christmas time. Given how important he was in the early church. But Nicholas is probably a good segue to all of the claptrap that Alexander Hislop brought into the misunderstanding of Christmas.
Yeah, we got to talk about him.
Yeah. Who is Hislop? To give some background, who is?
Oh gosh, in 19th century, hesitate to call the guy a theologian because he was really not that good of a theologian.
I hate that
he was an Anglican, unfortunately, but take heart. There are plenty of other Anglican theologians who are worth their salt. Hislop, however, was not amongst them. Tinker at best. But he wrote a notorious little tome called The Two Babylons, and he appropriated, and this is nothing new. I mean, we see it all over the internet today. People not really digging into primary source documents, but taking information from memes and just splicing stuff together that's a bunch of gobbledygook. I mean, Hislop and his ilk were doing that in the 19th century. And so this book, The Two Babylons, appropriates a lot of what's coming out of biblical and Near Eastern archaeology at the time, and just makes the worst literary paper mache collage you can imagine. He seems to center most of his ideas about connecting Christmas to paganism with the figure of Nimrod. And the reason he does that is because there is a site in northern Mesopotamia called Apkalū. It's mentioned in the Bible, and in later millennia became, via folklore, not proof, associated with Nimrod, and was dubbed by locals Nimrod. And the name of Apkalū was, except for its biblical reference, lost to the sands of history until archaeologists began to do work in Mesopotamia. So one of the reliefs that they found was of an Apkalū, which would basically be for students of the Bible, this would basically be the analog for the Watcher Angels in Enoch. Keep in mind that Hislop also has the benefit of the illustrations from stuff like Clement Moore's poem, The Night Before Christmas, all of the tradition of Father Christmas in England, and all of that imagery to work with. So he's guilty of something called pareidolia in the extreme here. Pareidolia is basically, it looks like, therefore it must be, which is an easy trap to fall into sometimes.
for any of us.
Just,
I mean,
just
even
for
in the
any
truther
of us.
community. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Unless you use the razor of reason to attack even what seems to be the most apparent and imminent of ideas, you can fall into that trap. And so he not only falls in, he dives in. And he reckons that this image of the Apkalū, which he dubs Nimrod, again, there's no connection there. There's no philological work, no archaeological work that would lead one to connect those two. But he just goes right ahead and does that. And if you look at this, it's a very famous one, very famous image of this Apkalū. But he's got a cap on, he has wings on, he's got a palm frond in one hand, and under one arm he is carrying a deer. And Hislop says, "Well, this is Nimrod, and it's Santa Claus is Nimrod." He has this revelation, and he says that this palm frond is actually an evergreen, which it's not. And he says that the deer that he's carrying is a reindeer, which it's not. It sort of looks like I've made this connection before. It sort of looks like the reindeer in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the Rankin Bass cartoon from the 60s.
Yeah. I remember
Claymation.
that.
Yeah, exactly, the
claymation.
stop motion, yeah.
Yep.
But in fact, this is a Persian fallow deer. It was native to the mountainous and high regions of the ancient Near East, from Iran all the way into Turkey. So, but for whatever reason, I think it's probably a demonic reason, but Hislop's work has gained a lot of traction in the circles of people who want to decry Christmas and say that it's pagan.
Which I still don't understand why. And I keep going back to that. Why? Does it make them more holy? Are they better law followers if they don't do pagan stuff? Did they not realize that some of our Hebrew law was pagan influenced?
Well, certainly. Well, I mean, again, now you're talking about shared culture, and the same was true of the Greco-Roman world.
Yeah.
No, the argument is absurd just on philosophical principles, because pagan by proxy, if you're praising the name of Jesus,
there you go. Amen.
I've heard a lot of angst over the years about, what if I'm accidentally worshiping these gods? I'm like, how? That's a matter of will and intent.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and I have to say that I think so much, Brandon, you were bringing up the question of why. I think that people, the things that they say like that, it makes you afraid. Oh no, am I doing something wrong? Am I going to be in trouble here?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's part of it, is a fear. So you're afraid, and then you run in the wrong direction because you're afraid of you're doing something wrong.
To me, it's like we trust the devil to deceive more than we trust God to guide us.
Yeah.
And the whole aspect of in Christus Victus, I mean, like you said earlier, Dr. Judd, we need to be putting flags on things like this instead of being afraid of them. I guess my analogy is this. In the Old Testament, you fled from lepers. In the New Testament, Jesus ran to lepers. And I kind of see that in the big cultural milieu. Yeah, I see a similarity there. And then I was thinking, too, about the whole, it's not a myth. It's like that study that there were so many babies that were born this year, and then there was more storks, and correlation in logic, and how there's a difference between causation and correlation. And I guess when I look at Hislop, I see a lot of correlation and not much
causation.
Like you said.
Yeah, that's it.
Or evidence. Yeah.
Well, and that it's always been interesting to me that presupposes that God couldn't use some element of pagan culture to lead somebody to his truth. What I mean by that is I'm thinking of the Magi. Here are guys that they're astrologers, and they're undoubtedly familiar with the Old Testament, or at least part of the Old Testament, because of Daniel's, whatever legacy Daniel left amongst the Magi. And he was there. The later generations would have benefited from it, but they were still pagan, essentially, because they were still worshiping the gods of Mesopotamia, and they're looking at whatever the Star of Bethlehem was, this conjunction of Saturn and Regulus and Virgo, if that's what it was, that heralded not just the birth of a king, but a king that would have tremendous impact in the shift that humanity was about to experience. And they were looking at, as they're watching this, they're looking at Jupiter as Marduk's star. They called it actually Nibiru is what they called it. If people want to
Really?
know what Nibiru really, the Babylonians called Jupiter Nibiru or Marduk star. Virtually every time you find it in Mesopotamian literature, it's a reference to Jupiter. But there's an example of God opening however many of them there were that went. Traditionally, it's 3, but we don't know that. It's not explicit about that. But there were a group of them that God used this element of pagan culture to open their eyes to the birth of the Messiah.
Well, I mean, God can use any means. It's all His. You said that earlier in the show. It's all His.
Mm.
I mean,
It's
he
all
owns.
His.
Yeah, Satan isn't an usurper. It's all God's.
All right, you're talking about Hislop, and this is really the first time kind of hearing about him. Would our traditions that we have right now, I mean, you have the Santa Claus inspired by the Apkalū, but the Christmas tree, Yule log, holly boughs, I've heard those scorned and said that's evil, and like the Yule log is you're actually bringing an example of a human sacrifice into your house. I've heard these crazy things.
Mm.
Is that where we get those all from Hislop, or are there other sources, or are people just slipping off the deep end a little
Well,
bit?
no, I think you're referencing people's use of passages in like Jeremiah and Deuteronomy that talk about the Asherah poles and they're adornment with things like silver or gold. Asherah poles were certainly cut from trees, but they weren't technically trees. They were basically wooden idols. Actually, Doug Van Dorn makes a really good case. I think he's actually taught and preached on this before about the Christmas tree actually being a representation of the world tree in Eden.
Yeah.
And you'll have to forgive me. He definitely does it more eloquently than I ever could. But it's all about will and intent. My grandmother, Christmas was her thing. Like every year, her house looked like Norman Rockwell meets West Texas. And so Christmas trees and greenery and lights and, Santa Claus and nativity scenes and just everything, all of it. And she was one of the most godly women I've ever known. And so when I hear this notion about accidentally worshiping pagan gods, giving homage to pagan gods because of these traditions being continued, arguments can be made for the separate adoption, Christian cultural adoption of these images that we associate with Christmas. Have nothing to do with paganism.
Well, and didn't Paul say something about when I'm with Jews, I act as a Jew, and when I'm with Gentiles, I act
Sure.
as a Gentile? I mean, that's just my heart, Dr. Judd, is mission. And you're not going to reach a people or a place coming in with your outside. That's what actually ruined a lot of the Christians in the world is we took our Western Christianity into it instead of allowing them their own incarnational is what I'd like to call it, Christianity. Well, one of my questions, and I think this probably needs to be brought up, and you can go in more into this, is Hislop had an axe to grind and an agenda with this book, Two Babylons. And can you go into a little bit of that? We just pulled a portion of it, and that might give people some context of why this is in there.
I think you're referring to Hislop's criticism of the Anglican Church at the time.
Or Catholic Church?
Yeah, the imagery of Catholicism and the Roman world sort of preserving these ancient pagan ideas, which is also still a trope today. But yeah, he embraced that sort of anti-Catholic sentiment about the preservation of those images. So yeah, he did have an axe to grind.
Yeah.
Yeah, imagine the whole Madonna and Child versus more pagan statues that looked similar.
Yeah.
Probably played into that, and
right, the virgin birth and the Isis and Horus statue, or
Semiramis.
I mean, these mythological images are archetypes. I mean, they definitely did exist, but my criticism of that approach has always been, so what? You don't think that? I mean, the devil and the demonic realm aren't omniscient, but they are intelligent and knew enough to be able to prognosticate some of what was going to happen down the road. And I think that's why we see a lot of these universal themes in mythology, that they were sort of counterfeits, because Jesus is the only example that we have of those things happening in real space and time. But because the demons weren't giving birth to demons. But that's my point, is that they were intelligent enough to sort of prognosticate and discern some of what was going to happen. That's why so many of the remnant of giants in the post-flood world were so ensconced in the ancient Near East. They didn't know exactly where Jesus was going to crop up, but they knew, they had a general idea of where that bloodline was going to be situated. By like manner, they could personify these ideas in these different cultures as their gods.
Yeah.
So later on they'll say, well, this Jesus, that's nothing new. Mithras was born of a virgin in a manger. Horus was supposedly conceived outside of the normal means. So they could, or any number of mythological themes that match the story of Christ. Buddha being speared to a tree, or Odin on the world ash. The same kinds of things. We see this tweaking of that idea to suit the ends of a demonic agenda, which is to obfuscate and blur the importance and the very event of the arrival of the Messiah into the world.
Yeah. Well, and too, just another example I think about, it's not so much about the gods, but think of how many times that Satan tried to eradicate a whole generation of children, from Moses, his area, and then Herod, and so yeah, you're right. They're not omniscient, but they're not dumb. To underestimate them would be stupid, but to give them too much power is, just in my opinion,
A bridge too far.
Yes, exactly, and to glorify them. I don't know if a lot of people in this vein of truthers, they seem to glorify by focusing on what the devil can do to you more than what God can do for you. And Paul says numerous places, put on the full armor of God, and to be aware of, we know his schemes and walls, and don't be tripped up by philosophy. But at the same time, I still think that God is the boss. I mean, he like you said, he owns everything, and you hear a lot of jokes about people playing 4D and 5D chess. I think he plays like what, infinite chess. I mean, so yeah, I just I know I'm a broken record here. It doesn't make sense to me why. And I think you're right, Dr. Judd. I think there's a satanic element here. I think there's a doctrine of demons here going on here to make people want to believe this kind of stuff.
Well, and it just serves to sow further dissension amongst
in the church.
believers.
Yes, yeah.
Exactly.
Like, we don't have enough. Anyway.
Right.
I do want to mention, when I was doing some research on this, that a guy's name came up, and I didn't know if you knew who he was, Dr. Judd, Ralph Woodrow. He actually, at one time, he defended Hislop, but then he wrote a book called The Babylon Connection. And I want to tell people out there about that book, but have you heard of him before?
I don't think so.
Yeah, because when I did some deep diving to talk to you about it, I couldn't find a credible historian anywhere that believes anything that Hislop wrote.
Yeah.
I mean,
credible being the operative word there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not YouTube researchers. So, yeah, I guess the bottom line to me is just that the whole argument, the whole thing, and then we talked about he had an axe to grind against the Roman Catholic Church and all that. It's just flimsy. And you were talking about his paper mache. To me, he made an incredible, like, big Guy Fawkes' straw man or something, to burn.
Mhm.
Anyway, little British humor there. So, what do you think, in your personal opinion, are some of the dangers to churches or people? Because I haven't really seen churches that teach this. Maybe like Herbert Armstrong's used to be Worldwide Church of God, which I think has become Orthodox, little o, Orthodox in recent years. But a lot of the Armstrongian type or the Seventh Day Adventists, maybe I don't know.
Yeah. Obviously,
Just
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh yeah, I forget about them. What do you think, Dr. Judd, would be the real danger of this heresy? Sort of. I mean, not really heresy, but yeah, just false teaching.
Rephrase that.
Yeah. Just what kind of impact do you think? Just scratch that. Psh, edit that out, Sandy. But I guess if someone was sitting in front of you, Dr. Judd, to kind of wrap up what we're doing here, and you had like one chance to tell them one argument that would probably pretty much seal the deal on the foolishness of a lot of this. I mean, it's just foolishness. It really is. I mean, I think we all agree. But yet it's still every year it creeps in. What would be your main go-to argument?
We should celebrate Jesus every day. I mean, it seems
Mhm.
almost cliche to say, we should have Christmas in our hearts all year round. Jesus told us to celebrate Him every time we got together.
Yeah.
And this is something that He talked to His disciples about at the Last Supper. And because we have so many cultural and historical reasons to celebrate in December, just because there may be things that are more cultural than theological, although I don't think that's the case, but it still doesn't make those cultural decisions anathema Christian theology.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
It would
good.
sound something like that.
Yeah, that's great. That's what I was looking for because I mean, a lot of times, if it's going to be a casual Facebook kind of thing, a lot of people are not going to be convinced because they're entrenched in it. They have their own agenda, but there are people that are on the line about this and have been in fear of, like Jen was talking about earlier, about been in fear of I don't want to make a mistake and celebrate a false god. I don't want to be wrong.
Mhm.
And I think what you said is marvelous, Dr. Judd. Well, what have you been up to, Dr. Judd? What do you want to tell everybody out there? Are you writing anything new? Are you doing any new
Uh,
projects or anything?
well, I've got the last bit of editing on my part for this book that Doug Van Dorn and I have been writing on the Serpent Mound of Bashan. I've also got a collection of research essays, basically an anthology that I'm going to be releasing, and then I'm re-releasing the 12 Days of Christmas Bible Studies.
Yeah.
For so yeah, still teaching. The Institute of Biblical Anthropology has these course programs. If people are interested, and they could go to burtonbeyond.net, check those out.
Okay.
Without a doubt, the most popular one is the Preternatural Morphology class, what Derek Gilbert affectionately calls the Monsters 101 class, where you get to look at things like vampires and werewolves through the lens of the Bible.
Yeah. Yep. Well, wow. Well, I'm excited for all that. Can't wait for your anthology to come out. I just want to dive into that, man. That just wow. Anyway, I'm such a goober, but I just love that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And this is going to be coming out Christmas time, even though we did a little earlier. And where could they find the 12 Days of Christmas if they want to?
I'll have a link on the burtonbeyond.net website, and then the new institute website is drjuddburton.com, and I'll have one there too.
Okay. Yeah. I encourage all you guys out there, man, jump on it. It's good stuff. Thank you so much, Dr. Judd, for coming on the show. And I appreciate you helping us dispel a myth, the myth that we can't celebrate the birth of our Lord.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Joe.
Yeah. Thanks for listening and supporting us. And remember, stay naturally supernatural.